The UFC touches down in the hometown of El Dirte for the first time. Jon Jones experiences a life-altering change, and two former Strikeforce middleweights battle each other in their UFC debut. I'm John Ramdeen, and those are your headlines, and this is Fight News Now Extra. Let's see what's happening in the world of MMA. For the first time in their history, the UFC will hold an event in Winnipeg, Manitoba. UFC 161 will be held on June 15th at the MTS Centre Arena, home of the NHL's Jets. According to reports, the card will be comprised of solid matchups, including Dan Henderson taking on Rashad Evans in the main event, and Mauricio Shogun Rua against fellow Brazilian Rogério Nogueira, and a rematch from Pride. Also rumored Jake Shields faces dangerous Tyron Woodley and a welterweight showdown. Jon Jones became a father for the third time on Monday, letting the world know via Twitter. The UFC light heavyweight champion's wife, Jessie, gave birth to Olivia Haven Jones, who weighed in at 6 pounds, 10 ounces. The birth came 2 weeks earlier than expected, while the champion is in heavy training for his upcoming April 27th tilt with Chael Sonnen. Former Strikeforce middleweight title challenger Tim Kennedy makes his octagon debut in July, but he meets former ADCC champion Roger Gracie on the undercard of UFC 162. Also rumored for this event is Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman, and a middleweight title showdown. Kennedy is 7-2 in his past 9, including a decision loss to Luke Rockhold, while Gracie is looking for his third straight victory. And joining me now, my good friend, Mr. Robin Black, and Roger Gracie taking on Tim Kennedy. Does the UFC really need to make this fight, or is it comes down to the loser out of town?
Well, I hope that's not the case. I mean, both these guys are great conversions that they brought over from Strikeforce. It's an interesting fight. Kennedy has almost 3 times as many fights. He's been fighting for twice as long, and you know, he's never been submitted. But this is Roger Gracie. This is one of the submission fighters in the world. I hope this isn't a loser leaves town match, because both of these guys belong here at 185.
But you have to imagine Roger Gracie with a victory earns about $100,000. Tim Kennedy, $80,000, and that's if they win the fight. I just think it's very, very strange. You know, you dissolve the Strikeforce organization, you bring over their talent, and then you start doing all these cuts. I think it's very strange for the UFC to, you know, kind of almost abuse some of these fighters the way they're doing it.
I mean, it's that, and really it's to the point now where it's like, is 80 grand a lot for a professional athlete?
No.
I mean, football players make $2 million a year. Hockey players start at $1.5 million. I mean, $80,000 to go in and get punched in the face in front of 16,000 people and 400,000 at home isn't a lot of money. So I hope it doesn't go this way.
Roger Gracie, of course, one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in all of the sport, as is fellow Brazilian Damian Maia, and we are getting word from sources close to both camps that there could be a matchup between Damian Maia and, wait for it, Rory McDonald in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And how badass would this matchup be?
Yeah, I mean, this is just not even one you even thought about. You know, you try to, as you're watching fights, you're like, wow, what if Rick Story fought John Ramdeen? You know, you think of all these cool fights. He'd kill you, by the way.
He would.
You think of all these really cool fights, but you don't think of this one. It's a really cool one. Rumors are a cool thing, and they belong in this sport for some reason. They fit in really well, because Dana White will tell you anything. And next week, oh yeah, John Ramdeen is definitely fighting for the heavyweight title. And the next week, he's not. You know, so it works well. This is not a sure thing by any means, but man, this Winnipeg card is shaping up nicely already.
Yeah, you talk about an excellent card. Who knows what the main event is? Could be Dan Henderson taking on Rashad Evans. I like Little Nogueira taking on Shogun in a rematch from Pride. That same year, Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner were bestowed the honor of having the fight of the year, while clearly the people that were voting on that had never seen the fight between Shogun and Nogueira from Pride. Absolutely epic. 2 of the best pure mixed martial arts fighters. The fight was good on the ground, it was good standing, there was takedowns, and it was in Pride. I mean, this is a great matchup. It's interesting to see how this fight will play out now under the rules of the UFC.
Yeah, hey man, there's a lot of these guys that you can use in a place like Winnipeg. First of all, Winnipeg is a great fight town. There's only like 600,000 people in the town, but it's a big city when it comes to fighting. You know, they've had fight shows there for decades. They have great gyms in the town, great fighters. Joe Dirksen, the Polish Experiment, all these guys come out of Winnipeg. This is a good place to have fights, and we've got got these guys like Shogun and Nogueira and Dan Henderson. We talk about how well you can use these guys as superstars. They don't have to fight the youngest guys. They don't have to fight the up-and-comers. They can put on great shows in great cities like Winnipeg.
Would you imagine that the UFC throws El Dirte a bone and says, yes, Joe Dirksen, you've done so much for us over your career. We want you to fight on the first card. Why not put this guy in the first or second fight of the night? Number one, he always brings it. He comes to throw down. Win or lose, Joe Dirksen always entertains.
Yeah, and Joe Dirksen at different times has stepped up for the WEC and the UFC and taken fights at the last second that they've needed him. He's put on great shows. He's a pioneer in Winnipeg. He's the coolest dude going. Put Joe Dirksen on this show.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Were you surprised by the move? We talked about it before that this could be the place for them. What about Calgary? Do you think the UFC is going to end up going back to Calgary, or do you think they'll establish a home here in Winnipeg?
Well, Winnipeg is going to do great for them. They're going to do great with the local people. They're going to do great with the press. This is a perfect place to hold fights. They'll be back to Calgary, and once they get everything sorted out in Vancouver, they'll be back to Vancouver as well. But Winnipeg is absolutely going to be a mainstay. They're going to go in, they're going to have a big show, and they're going to come back once or twice a year.
Of course, Winnipeg, just one of the stops here in the Great White North. Of course, we have to get through the welterweight championship matchup between George St-Pierre and Nick Diaz. It goes down March 16th, and we're getting close to that fight. People said it's not going to happen. Nick Diaz is going to bail. Well, looks like it's going to happen.
Yeah, this is going to happen. And as we get closer, you wonder what's going through these guys' minds. You know, George is dealing with this guy who talks a lot, this provocative guy who's been calling his name and pushing him around and saying all this stuff. We like to think of George as a robot, but we've never seen anyone really get under his skin. And I'm interested to see how the next 10 days heat up that way. Nick Diaz, you're not going to shake him, but ultimately he's going to have to put his money where his mouth is because he's fighting the toughest guys.
I do think this is kind of, it's not necessarily new territory for George St-Pierre because he kind of dealt with some of the similar elements in his fight with Koscheck. I think that he's just surrounded by a good team. He has the right professionals around him to say, this is just a part about selling the fight, and this is how most people are going to see your face. And I think George St-Pierre knows that it's part of the game. More from Fight News Now Extra when we return.